Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Introduction to SBIR and STTR Funding Opportunities. Thank you all for attending. Got a great audience out there. I see lots of people from all over the United States. Jonathan, thanks for attending. Appreciate it. Bob, good to see you again. Shira, I'm glad you can make it. I was hoping you would. Okay, so thank you all for joining from near and far. And today's subject will be Introduction to SBIR and STTR Funding Opportunities. My name is Stuart Jacobowitz. I'm Senior Director of Business Development at the FreeMind Group, and I'm delighted to be presenting today's webinar. To learn about the FreeMind Group, you can visit our website, freemindconsultants.com. And to keep up to date on the latest in non-dilutive funding, you're welcome to follow us on Twitter and YouTube, as well as join our LinkedIn group. Good catchy name to our LinkedIn group. Name is Non-Dilutive Funding for Life Sciences R&D. Say that 3 times fast. Past webinars, by the way, are available on YouTube, and today's will also be available on our YouTube channel, FreeMind Group. Also, all of you who are attending today will be receiving an email within the next coming days with the slide deck as well as a link to the recording. Please feel free to share it with your friends and neighbors and colleagues and anyone else who could find this interesting. At the end of today's webinar, we should have some time for questions. Hopefully I'll have the answers for you. And of course, you're always welcome to email me directly with any questions that you have that are specific to your situation or science. You'll find my contact information at the end of the slide deck today. So today's webinar is brought to you by the FreeMind Group. So just a little quick introduction about who we are. We're a consulting firm and we specialize in non-dilutive funding. Actually, I can say in all modesty, we're the global leader in non-dilutive funding. And our main objective is to help our clients get as much money as possible from non-dilutive sources, from U.S. non-dilutive sources. So we look mainly towards the NIH, that's the National Institute of Health. I'm sure you all know that, the DOD, Department of Defense, BARDA, DDIR, DARPA, CDC, FDA, NSF, and so on. Or as I'd like to say, just take the alphabet, mix up a few letters, and if there's a government agency or institute that provides R&D funding for the life sciences, we work with them and continue to work with them to help you get as much of that pie as possible. Of course, we also do work with private foundations when it's relevant. So even though today's subject is SBIRs, we do a lot more than just SBIRs. We've been doing this now for 18 years, a little more than 18 years. We currently have 55 full-time employees. And on average, we submit about 450 applications every year on behalf of our clients. So that's a great deal of expertise and knowledge and experience, which we put to work for each and every one of our clients and on each and every one of the grant applications we work on. And of course, our goal is to help you get the largest non-dilutive awards, the largest number as well as the largest dollars in non-dilutive awards as possible. We work with academics, research institutes, and university medical centers, as well as companies from small startups of just a few people. They just incorporated yesterday or will be incorporating tomorrow, all the way up to the big pharma and everything in between. Now, we see FreeMind as a tool to help you maximize your non-dilutive funding potential. What we do is when we start working with you, with the client, first thing we do is we identify the most relevant funding opportunities. Now that's a very important step because if you have great science, but you apply for a grant that's not relevant to your science, you use the incorrect mechanism, you will not be successful despite the fact that your science is really innovative and deserving of funding. Now, our analysts, what they do is they create a list of opportunities which match the projects that you're looking to fund. And with this list, we create a multi-submission strategy, which again, with our goals to maximize your chances of winning an award. We also manage the complex project production process, lead a joint application writing process. We do need you involved. We can't do this on our own. You guys are the experts, but we certainly do all the heavy lifting and as much as possible to take the work off your plate so that you can focus on your company and we can focus on getting the grants in and on time and to the highest of qualities. And of course, when it's relevant, we also support the final contract negotiations. So what we see here is the NIH budget for 2017. So out of the $50 billion that's allocated to funding the life sciences from U.S. sources, U.S. non-dilutive sources, about 64%, or about $32 billion, comes from the NIH. Now we also see here that about $27 billion out of that $33 billion is devoted to extramural research, such as research projects, grants, and R&D contracts. So although this is an SBIR webinar, keep in mind that, as I just said, these are great grants, these SBIRs, and great to apply for, great to win. But they're only a small percentage, as you'll see the percentages soon, of the funds that are awarded from the NIH and other government agencies. So make sure you don't ignore other mechanisms that are out there. And just to give you a little bit of a closer look at the breakdown of the spending, this is from the NIH. So you can see here some of the hot topics that are very well funded. You see cancer and neuroscience, each get almost about $6 billion. Infectious disease, about $4 billion. So there's a lot out there. Keep in mind, though, it's important for me to say that there is overlap. So it's not that if you total it up, it's going to come out to a lot more than $32 billion. There is overlap because, of course, some of the sciences fall into different categories. But the message here that I want you to keep in mind is that whatever your research idea is, there's probably funding for you from the NIH. Okay, so let's move on to the main course. Today we'll be discussing SBIRs, which is Small Business Innovation Research Grants, and STTRs, Small Business Technology Transfer Grants. What we'll discuss is the different features of the SBIR and STTR programs, how they differ, how they're similar. We'll discuss the eligibility criteria, what you need to do in order to be eligible, where you need to be, how you need to act. Of course, you need to act nicely. We'll discuss and review some samples of SBIR and STTR funding opportunities, and we'll stick in a few additional interesting points of information on the SBIR and STTR mechanisms. Now, a little background on the SBIR and STTR programs. They're congressionally mandated set-aside programs, which means that by law, money must be set aside for these programs every year. These were mandated by law SBIRs in 1982, STTR in 1992, so maybe older than some of you, certainly a lot older than me. And they're in order to strengthen the role of innovative small businesses in federally funded R&D. So what happens is federal agencies with extramural R&D budgets of more than $100 million are required by law to allocate 3.2% of their budget to SBIR programs every year. For those of you who have been doing this for a few years, you'll know that this percentage has gone up, I think, from about 2.5%. It's now capped out at 3.2%. The STTR program requires government agencies with extramural R&D budgets of $1 billion or more to set aside 0.45, a little less than 0.5% of the extramural research budget for STTR awards every year. Now, these SBIR and STTR programs are only available for domestic small business concerns, or also known as SBCs. And while the SBIR and STTR goal is to help small businesses engage in R&D, they're specifically looking to fund R&D which has the potential for commercialization. That's a very important goal of these programs, commercialization. So while we'll be focused mostly on the NIH today, we'll touch a little bit on the NSF. You should keep in mind that the SBIR programs are also available from the DoD, the CDC, and the FDA as well. The mission of the SBIR is, as you can see here, to support scientific excellence and technological innovation through the investment of federal research funds in critical American priorities to build a strong national economy. So among the goals of the SBIR STTR are to stimulate technological innovation in order to meet federal R&D needs. So what they're looking for is the commercialization of these innovations, because they want to help small businesses participate in the growth and development of the U.S. economy. And they also want to help socially, economically disadvantaged SBCs as well as women-owned businesses. Now, in order to be eligible for an SBIR or STTR, the entity applying for the grant must be a for-profit company, and it must have its place of business in the USA. So it also cannot have any more. It has to have less than 500 employees, including affiliates. It has to be more than 50% owned and controlled by one or more individuals who are citizens or permanent resident aliens of the United States, or it could be more than 50% owned and controlled by another for-profit business that is more than 50% owned and controlled by one or more individuals who are citizens and or permanent resident aliens of the United States. The lawyers are having fun here. And it may even be owned by multiple VCs or private equity firms or hedge funds, as long as no one of these VCs, private equity, or hedge funds own more than 50%. So it's important to note that all of these eligibility requirements must be met at the time of award. What that means is, for example, if you currently have 400 employees in your company, however, by the time the award is granted, you'll have over 500 employees. That's going to be an issue, and you will not be eligible to receive and win this SBIR award. Now, while SBIRs and STTRs have some similar goals, as we just saw, their objectives differ in that SBIRs are intended to increase private sector commercialization of innovations derived from federally funded R&D. And they do this by funding early-stage small businesses that are seeking to commercialize innovative biomedical technologies. While it's different by the STTRs, where those are intended to stimulate a partnership of ideas and technologies between innovative SBCs and nonprofit research institutions through federally funded R&D. So therefore, these STTRs require that the small business formally collaborate with the research institute in phase 1 and phase 2. Also, as far as the requirements, they're similar in many ways. However, they do differ in two major ways. First of all, regarding the principal investigator, the PI. So for an SBIR, the PI must be primarily employed by the company at the time of award and for the duration of the project, unless a waiver is granted. Now, when they say primarily employed, they mean that the PI must spend more than half of his or her time at this company, or in other words, the PI may not be full-time employee of another organization. On the other hand, for an STTR, the primary employment is not stipulated. So the PI can either be from the small business or from the collaborating nonprofit research institution. Additionally, SBIRs require that at least 2/3 of the work be done by the small business, while STTRs require that at least 40% of the work be done by the small business and at least 30% by the research institute. Also, it's important to remember that all of the work must be done in the US of A. Now, like I mentioned earlier, SBIR and STTR programs are available from many government agencies, NIH, NSF, DOD, and others, but today we're going to focus on the NIH, and also we'll touch a bit on the NSF a bit later. Give you a little flavor, the NIH gives out approximately, for the last few years, has awarded approximately $900 million every year for the SBIR and STTR programs. And they're structured in 3 phases. The objective of phase 1 is to establish the technical merit, feasibility, and commercial potential of the proposed R&D efforts, and to determine the quality of performance of the small business awardee. prior to providing further federal support in phase 2. So as far as the funding goes, the SBIR and STTR awards are similar in that they normally do not exceed $150,000 in total costs. However, with appropriate justification, awards can exceed this by 50% or up to $225,000. However, newsflash, that's not all, because I just heard Dr. Todd Haim, Program Director of the SBIR Development Center at the NCI, that's the NIH's National Cancer Institute. He spoke in the non-dilutive funding summit that FreeMind held early January during JP Morgan week, and he said that most of the NIH institutes will now fund with approval up to $300,000 for the phase 1. So that's taking basically double what the original of $150,000. Now, as far as the time period goes, SBIR phase 1 is for up to 6 months, and STTR phase 1s are for up to 1 year. The objective of phase 2 is to continue the R&D efforts initiated in phase 1, and funding is based on the results achieved in phase 1 and the scientific and technical merit and commercial potential of the project proposed in phase 2. Here, only phase 1 awardees are eligible for phase 2 awards. Now, phase 2 SBIR and STTRs normally do not exceed $1 million of total costs for up to 2 years. However, with appropriate justification from the applicant, Congress will allow awards to exceed these amounts by up to 50% or up to $1.5 million. And here too, newsflash, according to our friend Dr. Haim of the NCI, now most of the institutes will even award up to $2 million for a phase 2 SBIR. So lots of good money out there. Don't miss out on it. Now, there's also a second phase 2 award where agencies may award a second sequential phase 2 to continue a phase 2 project. It's not so well known, but it's not something new. The NIH has been offering this for a few years now. You may know this as a phase 2B award or a competing renewal or a phase 2 bridge award, all the same. The purpose of this award is to support the next stage of development for federally funded SBIR phase 2 projects, to address the funding gap known as the Valley of Death between the end of SBIR phase 2 awards and the subsequent round of financing needed for commercialization. I was going to tell you a little bit about the direct to phase 2 SBIRs. However, unfortunately, the mechanism has expired. It may be renewed, so stay tuned for further details as they become available. But for now, you still can apply for a Fasttrack award. Now, these Fasttracks incorporate a submission and review process in which both the phase 1 and the phase 2 grant applications are submitted and reviewed together as one application. Because both phases undergo review at the same time, the NIH Fasttrack mechanism can reduce or eliminate the funding gap between the phases. Now, it's worth noting that the NSF, which does have SBIR and STTR programs, does not offer a Fasttrack option. And now we go over some solicitations. In a few minutes, I'll point out which programs offer the Fasttrack option. So don't go away. The standard due dates for SBIRs and STTRs are every 4 months. They're on the January 5th, April 5th, and September 5th. That usually takes around 4 months to get initial review and another 4 months, or a total of 8 months from the time the application is submitted until you see the money. However, again, Dr. Haim, by the way, you can catch his presentation on our YouTube channel. Dr. Haim of NCI, when he spoke, he mentioned that they're working very hard to reduce the time from application to award down from 8 months to closer to 6 months. So just being that we are now February 1st, a little more than 2 months till the April 5th deadline, I suggest that if that's of interest to you and that's relevant to you, which it should be, I suggest you get started right away so you can make this deadline. These are the standard dates. However, there are some opportunities that do have non-standard due dates. So as always with every solicitation, I strongly urge you to pay attention to the details, read each solicitation correctly, just to make sure you don't miss any deadlines or any other important information. So let's look at some of the funding opportunities. They basically fall into two general categories: solicited and unsolicited. An unsolicited opportunity, also known as an investigator-initiated opportunity or an omnibus solicitation or parent announcement. It's where the investigator, on his or her own, submits a research application. Now, just about every NIH institute participates in these parent announcements, so if you can't find any solicitations which exactly fit your science, you can always go the omnibus route. Now, it's important that you understand that approximately 65% of all awards across the NIH are unsolicited, so I strongly urge you to pay attention to these unsolicited or parent announcements. So let's start off looking at some omnibus solicitations, or as I like to say, let's take a ride on the omnibus. Here we see two SBIR omnibus solicitations where applications are accepted for Phase 1, Phase 2, and Fasttrack. The first omnibus solicitation is an SBIR parent announcement from the NIH. Now, most NIH institutes, most of the 27 institutes participate in this parent announcement, which offers standard funding and standard due dates. So again, next deadline, April 5th. The second omnibus solicitation is an STTR parent announcement. Here too, most of the NIH institutes participate, funding is standard, and due dates are standard, again, April 5th. For the Fasttrack application, you submit both the Phase 1 and the Phase 2 application together, as I mentioned before. The Phase 1 portion of Fasttrack must specify clear and measurable goals or milestones that should be achieved prior to initiating Phase 2 work. So if you are awarded this Fasttrack, the Phase 2 portion may not be funded until a Phase 1 final report has been received and assessed by the program staff showing that Phase 1 milestones have been successfully achieved. Here we have a direct to Phase 2 SBIR. It's a parent announcement to support biomedical technology development. As I mentioned before, and as you can see here, the direct to Phase 2 mechanism have expired. However, there is still one open, which has a deadline of April 5th. So if by chance you're looking to submit a direct to Phase 2 application to support extended development, hardening, and dissemination of technologies in biomedical computing, informatics, and big data science, then you better get going now, because this is your last chance before it expires, and who knows if it will be renewed. I mentioned also the NSF offers an SBIR program. So they actually fund about 400 companies every year via their SBIR STTR program for a total of about $190 million. A little bit smaller than NIH, but still lots of good money there. And just to give you a little flavor, in fiscal year 2015, 271 companies were awarded NSF SBIR STTR Phase 1 grants. The median winning company was only 1 year old, and it had only 3 employees. So don't think that you need to be bigger, you don't have the bandwidth. You certainly can do this either on your own or with help. But it's something that you really should not miss out on. Here we have an NSF SBIR Phase 1 solicitation, and it's by the Directorate for Engineering, Industrial Innovation, and Partnerships. The R&D should be based on innovative transformational technology with potential for great commercial or societal benefits. The program invites proposals for small businesses across a broad range of science and engineering disciplines, and if successful, you receive up to $150,000 to $225,000 for a 6-month development feasibility project, And then you could compete for a second grant of up to $750,000 for over a 2-year period with the aim of advancing the technology toward commercial deployment. This solicitation asks for information about your track record of commercialization. However, if you're a startup, you should not worry because they do encourage proposals from both new as well as seasoned entrepreneurs. So don't think, oh, I'm just starting, I have no chance. Go for it. You got a chance. Now, what's most important is that you have a transformative idea or innovation and that your team's primary goal is the commercialization of the technology. This is a very broad solicitation, as you can see. However, there are certain selected topics the NSF is looking to fund, including advanced material and instrumentation, biological technologies, smart health, biomedical technologies, and many more. Now, there's a complete 34-page list of topics, and you can see it on the NSF website. You see on the bottom of the screen here the link to the NSF website, which has the complete and comprehensive list. Don't worry about marking it down now. Like I said, I'll be sending you the slide deck within the next couple of days, so you'll have that link. Oh, and by the way, just as an aside, Freemine's success rate with the NSF SBIRs is about 60%. Not bad. We've got to pat ourselves on the back sometimes. Now, the NSF, unlike the NIH, which has 3 deadlines a year, standard deadlines, NSF has 2 standard deadlines a year. And as you can see here, the NSF set aside monies for 200 SBIR Phase 1 awards and almost 50 STTR awards in fiscal year 2015. But the funding is pretty good. Success rates are not bad either. So, by the way, notice, like I said before, there is no fast-track option with the NSF, but it certainly is a great mechanism, great opportunity that should not be missed. Now, I just mentioned a couple there, but you could see here just a quick list of solicitations, SBIRs. Now, if you go to the NIH website and you do a search for SBIRs, STTRs, you'll find there are 79 open solicitations. Well, actually, I should be honest, I did this a couple days ago, so it may have changed, but there's about 79 open solicitations that are ready and waiting for you to apply for. So you see here, there's from the NIDDK, National Institute of Diabetes, Digestive and Kidney Disease, for exploratory clinical trials for small businesses. There's from NIAID, National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, an SBIR Phase 2 clinical trial implementation cooperative agreement. And from the National Human Genome Research Institute, that's the NHGRI, there's an SBIR for novel genomic technologies, technology and development. So find what's appropriate for you, and again, don't forget about the parent announcements, but the important thing is to get going, to get started. As I said before, SBIRs and STTRs are not easy. Actually, none of the government grant money is easy. It's not like an ATM where you just walk up, punch in a few buttons, and you get your money. They each have their own requirements and challenges. The SBIRs and STTRs have some inherent challenges. Like I mentioned before, the Phase 1 SBIR, you have to make sure that the company is responsible for at least 2/3 of the work, and the research institute can complete up to 33% of the work. They don't have to. In SBIR, the company can do everything. In the Phase 2, the company is responsible for at least 50% of the work. For the STTRs, this small business must perform at least 40% of the work, and the U.S. Research Institute must perform at least 30%. So you see, both are required here, unlike in SBIR. And the remaining 30% of the work can be performed by either the SBC or the collaborating U.S. nonprofit research institute or some other third party. Now, this does not mean that a virtual company is ineligible. However, you do need to know how to deal with it, and there are different ways, but that's not really for the scope of this conversation. Regarding milestones, one of the goals of the SBIR and STTR programs is commercialization of innovations. So these programs are very interested in product development. Therefore, showing milestones and meeting them is very important. There are several atypical or uncommon sections that must be submitted with these SBIRs, different than other mechanisms from the NIH. Like in a phase 2 proposal, for example, you have to submit a 10-page commercialization plan. There are numerous items that must be addressed when assembling this document, and the language used should be more businesslike and less scientific. It should convey the company's ability to commercialize the product both from a managerial perspective as well as economic viability. Also, the consortium or collaboration is also a vital part of the application when percent effort in-house versus work outsourced is questionable. You also need to ensure that all aspects of the application are covered from an expertise perspective. It's sometimes wise to implement a plan for multiple PIs. Again, this is part of the strategy, part of the issues that you need to take into consideration when you are working to submit your SBIR or STTR application. And finally, it's important to make sure that the application you submit is a consolidated, coherent application and it's responsive to the solicitation's requirements and guidelines. Again, you could have great science, great people, great technology, but if it does not meet the solicitation's guidelines, it's going to get rejected. Now, once you've submitted the grant application, what happens? So let's take a moment to look at the NIH review process, which, by the way, is fairly similar to the review process of the NSF, DOD, and other funding institutes as well. What they're basically doing when they're reviewing, considering whether to fund your application, is they weigh the strengths versus the risks. The way they do this is by looking first at two things. They look at the responsiveness and the competitiveness. Are you responsive to the solicitation? Because again, no matter how good your science is, if you're not responsive to the solicitation, you're not going to be awarded. And are you competitive? When we talk about competitive, they mainly look at 5 criteria and score you on these 5 areas. They look at the significance. Does the project address an important problem and have a commercial potential? Is there a market pull for the proposed product or project? Is it innovative? How novel is the technology or project and the approaches proposed to test its feasibility? The leadership, are the investigators, collaborators, consultants appropriately trained and capable of completing all the project tasks? They look at the environment. Does the scientific environment contribute to the probability of success? What kind of facilities do you have? But ultimately, what makes the difference between a good application that is not awarded and one that's a great application that is awarded is your scientific approach. Are the design and methods well developed and appropriate? Are the problems areas addressed? Are potential pitfalls and alternative approaches provided? Because we know ultimately top-notch science is what wins the awards. Now for a little bit of a more broad perspective, I'd like to take a step back and give you an idea of our approach at FreeMind to non-dilutive funding and how to maximize your chances for award. First of all, you need to know the interest of the agency. What's on their agenda? What are they looking to fund? What will not get funded because it's not within the scope or was within the scope in previous years but not now? If necessary, and again, our speakers at the Non-Dilutive Funding Summit in January mentioned this a number of times. If necessary, communicate with the program officers at the funding agencies. It's extremely important and extremely valuable. You also need to focus your project application. A focused application has a much higher chance of being favorably reviewed. Remember, the NIH does not fund companies or labs, they fund projects. You don't want your proposal to come across to reviewers as overly ambitious or unrealistic. So you should make sure to ask, as far as money, you should ask for what's necessary. Don't inflate the budget or ask for too little. You have to have an accurate budget that shows that you're realistic and understand your project. You also have to make sure to present a complete project. Have one comprehensive storyline and leverage on research collaborations, whether or not the mechanism requires it, or in a case where there's a gap in your capabilities, it's important to collaborate. Take on consultants, statisticians, or outsource work you're less proficient at or don't have the expertise to complete. In an effort towards maximizing your chance to win an award and to win the largest award, I don't think I can overstate the importance of targeting the right mechanism. I know I mentioned it a couple of times, but it really is extremely important. As you saw in the various solicitations I showed, there are many solicitations and many different mechanisms. While we're focusing on SBIRs and STTRs, there are plenty more, and it's very important to know your way around these mechanisms, as they represent more than just letters and numbers. Rather, they represent the requirements of the solicitation, the nature of the project, the budgetary factors, the cooperation from the NIH, and much more. There are different pockets of money, and you really need to target what's right for your project. So it's vital to understand the different award sizes and success rates. Know the different funding levels and match them to your requirements and needs. And of course, conduct a thorough strategic assessment. What are your objectives? What research do you have, and what stage of development are they? Where would you like your research to be in the next 12 to 24 months? And what's the potential for success for each of these research projects? And all in all, this should be done with the goal of creating with the goal of creating a multi-submission granting strategy, because we know the more shots on goal, the better your chances for success. So to summarize, what we do at FreeMind, we offer two core services. First, we conduct a strategic assessment, where our client strategist begins by understanding your specific science, where you are now, where you'd like to be in the next 12, 24 months. Based on a series of conference calls, as well as sharing information, our analysts come up with a list of opportunities, and we create our multi-submission strategy. And remember, specific solicitations typically account for only around 30%, 35% of the awards. The remaining 65% or so are unsolicited or investigator-initiated. In order to properly file for one of these omnibus or unsolicited awards, our analysts engage program officers to get their feedback. A lot can be learned about how to best focus the application by speaking with these program officers, and this also improves your chances for success. The strategic assessment is an ongoing process that we conduct here, and funding opportunities present themselves literally every day. So when something new emerges or is issued that meets your project requirements, they will present it to you, and we will add it to the strategic plan. Once we have this multi-submission strategy in place, the grant consultants join the picture and they manage the grant writing process. It's a joint effort, like I said before. We can't do it without you. We manage the process and take on the heavy lifting. We create comprehensive templates based on solicitation guidelines, fill in as much information as we can. Then it's a back and forth process, with you answering different questions, filling missing information, and us converging information, writing, editing, rewriting, and organizing budgets, as well as all parts of the application, until everything is perfect. We have the most compelling, coherent, and best quality application possible, and then we take care of the submission. So that really brings us to our conclusion. I know I teased you a little bit on the bottom right for those who paid attention. It said we're going to have 39 slides, but I figured it's always best to be a little bit shorter. So we end with this here. Again, you can catch this recording on YouTube, which I'll be sending you the link. You also have we'll be sending you the slide deck. You can follow us on Twitter to find out about new information. We look forward to keeping in touch. Now we do have a couple of minutes for questions. Let's see if anybody has asked any questions. Okay, so we have a question here about the eligibility of virtual companies. So I touched on that a bit. So as Dr. Haim again, Dr. Todd Haim, from our friend from the NCI, so he mentioned, one of the things he mentioned in his presentation, that the NIH is trying to be more understanding of virtual companies, because they realize sometimes that it makes more sense to be virtual. So for example, if you subcontract out some work and the subcontract, the CRO, is just performing the technical portion, but you're doing the intellectual part, then that's not considered totally virtual. It's not considered that you're outsourcing everything. But bottom line really is each case has to be judged by its own merits. You have to see what works best for you, what strategy works best for you, and take it from there. Another question, is there really enough time until April 5th? Like I said, we have like about 2 months left till April 5th. From our point of view, yes, there's certainly enough time. We, about a third of the grants we do, about 100, 150 grants every year, we submit our SBIRs. We have a lot of experience doing them. We really know how to do it. We know how to do them well. So for us, it's certainly enough time. For you as well, if you sit down and you focus, you can certainly make the April deadline. And since you'll have to wait another till September, I think I said, until the next deadline. So I strongly urge you not to miss on this April SBIR deadline. I believe that's all the time we have now. If you have questions, please email them to me, Stuart@FreemindConsultants.com, and I will get back to you as quickly as possible. Like I said, I'll be sending out the slide deck in the coming days, along with the recording of today's presentation. You can find other webinars that we presented, as well as all of the speakers at this year's, as well as past year's non-dilutive funding summits. We had some great speakers from the NCI, SBIR, NSF. We had from the Department of Defense. This year we had someone from CARB-X, BARDA. So I strongly recommend that you check out our YouTube. Be in touch with us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions. And of course, we certainly would be happy to work with you. Next week, we have, I believe, another webinar coming up, so stay tuned to your emails. Make sure to register. I'm sure it'll be great, by my colleague Jonathan. And I thank you all for attending. I wish you a good day, and look forward to being in touch with you soon.